If you ask restaurant owners what their biggest challenge is, it's hiring and keeping great employees. Yet top performing restaurant owners know that if you have a great manager at each of your locations, this becomes much, much easier. Which is why we're covering that in this video. This is the ultimate guide to getting a top 1% restaurant manager, where we'll go through the best interview questions to find top talent, the systems that set your managers up for success, and more. What inspired this video was my conversation with Mario Del Perro, the owner of 53 location restaurant group Mendocino Farms. What's so inspiring about Mario is he built his 50+ location restaurant group using this model, and it's actually how he started his career as a manager in helping grow somebody else's restaurant group to tens of millions of dollars. I've now seen this pattern many times in working with thousands of restaurant owners and in building my own team of 175 people using these strategies. The old school model to restaurant management was to bring in somebody that acted more like a supervisor or babysitter, somebody to stand in when the owner wasn't there so that if anything went wrong or people needed to be babysat, they could reactively solve problems as they came up. They were like the head babysitter, just reacting to problems and babysitting the team, but not getting proactively involved in making the business better. That's why Chick-fil-A changed everything when they invented their managing partner model. That means the manager becomes proactive in partnering with the owner in understanding the P&L and driving growth and improving the business, not just reacting to problems. That may sound unrealistic to you, this idea that your manager could act as a partner to you. So that's why later in this video, we're going to talk about how you pitch it to them, how you set them up, the right systems to make this person operate like a partner to you, and how you can align their compensation with the success and continued growth of your restaurant's profitability so that you each win as your restaurant concept grows. So that's part one, making sure you have the right manager in place using these systems and questions. And if you already have a manager in your restaurant, this section is also relevant to you because it'll help you figure out whether you have the right person in place to set you up for scale or whether you need to look for somebody better. It first comes down to ensuring your manager has an owner mindset. I break this down into 3 categories to evaluate their mindset. The first category is learner's mentality. Do they have one? Are they researching business and new technologies to figure out the best ways to apply them to grow a company? The best questions to check talent for this are, how do you learn? Are there any books or podcasts or videos that have especially helped you grow? Because in 2025, there's so many free resources that they could learn from, or low-cost resources like books. And if they haven't bothered to spend the time researching and learning on their own, it means that they probably won't do that if you give them the role. The reason the learner's mindset is so important in building your restaurant is that as your restaurant scales from doing entry-level amounts of sales, a few $100,000s a year, to then doing millions a year and expanding to multiple locations, the role of the restaurant manager also has to evolve to meet the scale of the business. And if they're not constantly learning and growing along that journey, then you're going to have to find a new restaurant manager each time you reach a new stage, and they're not going to be scanning the landscape for what's changing, for the new technologies that can help you, for the new systems to put in place to make your staff more efficient or more engaged, and ultimately it sets you up for failure. So the number one thing to screen for from a mindset perspective is the learner's mindset. But it's not the only thing. There's 2 other key things to screen for in the mindset of your future management talent. That brings us to the second most important part of your restaurant manager's mindset, their hunger. When people are truly hungry to succeed, they'll find a way to do it. And this pairs nicely with the learner's mindset, but it's an independent trait. The way you suss this out in people is you get to know them deeply on a personal level. I like questions like, what drives you? And then after hearing their response, asking why. Why does that drive you? Was there some formative experience that led to that thing that you value, or was it just born into you? And the truly driven people know why they're driven and the ways that they are able to apply their drive in a way that those that aren't as driven don't. Then the third most important mindset part is having an owner's mindset. When I'm interviewing candidates for this trait, my favorite question is having them describe what they did in some of their past roles. Let's say they worked at Burger King or some other local restaurant and asking them what their favorite parts of the role or their frustrations with the company were. This just gives you an overview to set up the next question, which really shows if they had an owner mindset through that journey. Because then you ask, if you were the owner of Burger King, or if you were the owner of that other local restaurant that you worked at, what would you have done differently to improve it? Now, here's where things get interesting, because if they operate with an owner's mindset in every role they take, they've probably thought deeply for months or years in their past role about how to improve the business beyond just their specific role. Even if they were a server, they've probably taken notice at how the back of house needed to operate with more discipline, and maybe thought about how a kitchen display system they saw in a past restaurant might have helped them streamline their processes, or about how the restaurant's marketing was a little bit flawed because it seemed to focus too much on school events for a restaurant whose customer base tended to be older than school-aged families. Whatever their response, as long as they're demonstrating to you that they think about business more holistically and that they're able to identify different opportunities for improvement in some of their past roles from the owner or manager's perspective, that to you should be a sign that they're going to operate with that mentality and being a partner to you in growing your business and growing the profitability of your company by identifying where those opportunities for improvement are and then executing them if they've got that learner's mindset and hunger. Okay, so now that we've covered mindset and screened first for those things, being able to have a learner's mentality, having high hunger for success, and having an owner's mindset, it's also important to take them through the usual scorecard to evaluate their restaurant management abilities. And that's the second part of the restaurant manager scorecard, which I recommend doing in a secondary interview, first screening for mindset and describing the role, pitching it to them, and then if they have the right mindset, then moving into the more time-intensive part of your interview process, which is evaluating their skill set. The first thing to evaluate on the skill set part of your interview is their operations management ability. My favorite question for this is, walk me through your typical daily routine as a manager. A great response to this question is a very regimented daily routine, what they do from opening to closing and having a specific system that they follow. A bad response is just saying, oh, it depends on the day. I just walk in there and as problems come up, I'm there to help, because that to you signals that they're going to be more reactionary and they don't have a proactive way of operating in a restaurant. Then another interesting question to answer, which is particularly relevant in today's day and age where this happens so frequently, is how do you handle unexpected staff shortages? The best answers to this are people that say that they personally step into the front lines, whether it's as servers or line cooks, while they figure out how to deal with those unexpected staff shortages and look for short-term talent to fill them. But a bad answer is, oh, it's very frustrating. I call the owner and I tell them they need to get more staff. Again, somebody that takes that more reactive approach, which you probably have heard in your restaurant before, and there's nothing that is more frustrating than a manager that takes the big problem and just calls you up and tells you about it, but doesn't actually work getting their hands dirty and solving it. The next part of their scorecard focuses on their leadership abilities, which the most relevant question to lead with is always, how do you build motivated teams? And how do you manage underperforming staff? The ideal answer to building motivated teams is something along the lines of setting clear expectations, communicating the why behind each request, and consistently referring to making customers happier, making guests have brighter days as a result of the interactions with your hospitality staff. People that are really focused on the customer and consistently reframing things for your entry-level servers or hosts as delighting guests will always be pushing people in the right way in the positive sense. Now, on how they manage underperforming staff, you want people that are very clear managers that set clear expectations about what people should do and hold them accountable to things like showing up in the right uniform or following the right procedures, but that also don't have infinite patience for underperforming staff. One of the most brutal but important things to remember about effective restaurant management is if you can't change the people, you've got to change the people. Meaning that if you can't quickly coach entry-level team members into providing great customer experiences, it means you've got the wrong people. And you've got to have a manager that is very pragmatic about doing that, that knows that if somebody isn't showing up with the right mindset and making staff happy and not responding quickly to coaching, it means that you've got the wrong person in place. And not only is that person going to lead to inferior guest experiences, but they have the potential to contaminate the culture around them, versus if you're carefully filtering for people that are customer and hospitality obsessed and really want to brighten guests' days through the interactions they have with your customers. Another one of my favorite leadership questions is, tell me about a team conflict you resolved. Because if you've worked in restaurants, you know that team conflicts can happen a lot. And one of the most common reasons is conflicts about who is supposed to fill what hours. So what I listen for in this type of response, if somebody, for example, is sharing an hours-based conflicts where people didn't realize what their shift was, is somebody that has a very calm demeanor in describing where the miscommunication was, and that finds a way to motivate team members, to help team members realize that there was just a miscommunication and set up a system for resolving that miscommunication in the future, versus somebody that says, oh, there was this team conflict, so I fired the bad apple or something, that immediately just results to pulling the trigger on people, versus very carefully listening for where the opportunity for conflict resolution was, which is often a breakdown in communication, and setting up better communication systems and better operational systems to diffuse that in the future. Then, my most important leadership question is, what's your approach to setting new employees up for success? The key here, and the key to all of management, is that management is setting clear expectations and holding people accountable to those expectations. But what the best managers say on this front is that they set up very clear training systems where they walk the employees through what the expectations are for their role, when they're supposed to show up, what uniform they're supposed to show up in, the way they're supposed to greet guests and take orders. The more detailed their response is in training new employees, and the more proactive they've been in the past in setting up training guides and walking you through how they do employee coaching, the more effective they're going to be in managing your front lines. Because ultimately, with the restaurant business and so many people joining your restaurant in entry-level positions, it's vital to have a good system in place for level setting on expectations and always returning back to what's going to create the best guest experience. What type of greeting can we have for guests? Or what type of language can we use when we're taking their order or listening to requests to ensure that we represent the restaurant's hospitality and friendliness well, to make sure that our new guests become regulars? So somebody that has a clear methodology for achieving great employee training is obviously going to be a great sign. The third key skill set that the ideal manager has for your restaurant is financial management. And we've already started to touch on this one, but it's worth diving deep with potential candidates, because ultimately you need them to eventually operate as your partner. So my first favorite question is, how do you analyze and control food costs? Somebody that can walk you through how food costs are calculated and then describe how they negotiate with suppliers or how they collaborate with your chef to bring the food costs down is an A+ answer. You want your manager watching those things and eventually incentivized by driving down food costs and driving down labor costs and ultimately driving up the profitability of your restaurant. The next great question on evaluating financial management is, tell me more about your budgeting process. Again, if they have a clear, structured answer that accounts for all of the standard operating expenses of a restaurant and has some buffer for the cash flow management of a restaurant, that's an A+ answer, because it means that they already have experience as operating like an owner within the restaurant and watching costs versus just being a reactive supervisor or babysitter. Another great question in controlling the other major cost group is, how do you optimize labor costs? What I've noticed is that some of the best answers in 2025 for labor costs are transitioning to a more labor-light model. If the candidate you're speaking to can describe how they transition people from ordering by calling you on the phone, which consumes labor cost, to driving online orders, ideally through using an AI phone answering service or by training your team, that will optimize your labor costs by a few points minimum and lead to higher average order sizes. This is what our platform at Owner.com does, and we've noticed that a lot of the top performing restaurants optimizing labor costs are able to do it through shifting the 20 to 30% of orders that are still happening on phones to happening online instead, because that doesn't require an order taker to take those orders. But other great answers are related to shifting, are related to how to properly staff depending on your hours, and any level of deep thought on this topic is a great sign that this person will be ready to optimize your labor costs. Managing your costs is important important, but it's all for nothing unless you have consistently happy customers, which is the most important thing to evaluate the philosophy of your future manager on. Meaning that you want somebody that is constantly thinking about how they can make every customer delighted after interacting with your restaurant, including when things go wrong, because inevitably in restaurants, some things will go wrong. A customer's order could go wrong, or it could be late, or it could get lost, and inevitably there'll be customer complaints. So my favorite initial question is, how do you diffuse angry customer complaints? The best answers to this are clear thinking around how you turn an unhappy customer into a happy customer, and not just leading with comping the meal, but actually the framework for training your staff to apologize to customers that have been inconvenienced, saying, I'm sorry, I feel horrible about this going wrong, and I'd love to help make it right. So anybody that can give you that answer that doesn't just immediately lead to comping the guest and wishing them well, but that instead involves connecting deeply on an emotional level with that guest, taking responsibility and turning unhappy guests into raving fans, is going to be the best in customer service. In a management role in particular, it's important that they don't just have a framework for managing unhappy guests, but that they also can maintain really high service standards. So asking, what's your approach to maintaining service standards? Or tell me about how you've trained your teams in the past to provide great hospitality and service will give you a lot of signal on whether they're the right manager for you. A lot of these questions have focused on the theory of how managers think about running a restaurant. But if you want to know whether they actually walk the walk instead of just talk the talk, the best types of questions to ask are tell me about a time questions. Like, tell me about a difficult customer situation that you resolved. If they can give you a concrete example of how they've applied some of the different systems that they're describing to you with a real customer complaint, it's a good sign that they actually practice these things and aren't just giving you what they think are going to be the right answers. If you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of questions we just covered, what we've done for you is created the ultimate guide to hiring a restaurant manager. This document that gives you all of these questions and a scorecard that goes along with them so that you can score each of their answers as they're giving them to you and ultimately evaluate manager candidates against one another on each of these dimensions, mindset and skill set. So if you want that, it'll be down in the pinned comment below. You can download it for free and use it for your future management recruiting. But it doesn't cover some of the most important things of setting up your manager for success or operating with this new managing partner model, which is what we're going to cover next in this video. But before we move on to the next section, I want to share a pattern that I've noticed in some of the highest potential restaurant managers for independent restaurant owners to partner with, which is they tend to recruit rising stars within mid-sized or large restaurant chains. People who aren't quite at the general manager of the region level yet, but people who are quickly working their way up from entry-level roles to being team leads and supervisors and managers of single location larger groups. These people not only tend to be really high potential that are stuck under layers of upper management and will be attracted to working directly with an owner, but they also tend to be great because they've seen great restaurant systems up close. If they've worked in a mid-market group or a larger chain, they've seen what running a rigorous restaurant operation is like, and they'll be able to bring over a lot of those systems, processes, and learnings to your restaurant group to accelerate your learnings and help you operate with the level of rigor that is required for achieving multiple locations. One of the other things to look for in these people is what I call talent magnetism. It's something that is vital to look for in all of your talent, but especially managers, which is asking yourself the question, are they magnets for high talent? Being a magnet for high talent means the combination of bringing good energy, like actually being fun to work with and seeming fun to talk to, and seeming hardworking and trustworthy on their first impression. A great question to ask yourself as you're getting to know restaurant manager candidates, because you're going to be hiring a lot of entry-level talent that is going to be asking themselves this question, is would the younger version of you in high school or college or in entry-level positions be excited to work for this person? Because when you're hiring a manager, you need to hire the type of person that is going to be magnetic for very high potential entry-level talent. You want your servers and line cooks and expediters to actually be excited about the culture you're building. And that is what is going to make them stick around for years and show up with a positive mindset. Having people that they work with, that they enjoy working with, and that they're inspired by. There's a lot of research that shows that somebody's tenure at a job has more to do with whether they have friends at work and enjoy working with people that they work with than it does have to do with compensation or title. So it's really important to make sure that the person that is managing the restaurant restaurant is loved by your entry-level team members so that they stick around for a long time. An example of somebody that I've seen really crush this is the manager of Doodah Diner, Laura. When Timmery hired her, the owner, she was an entry-level server, but she had such great energy and operated with such an owner mindset that over the years, she worked her way up into being the manager of the concept. And importantly, Timmery has had years of loyalty from her staff because they not only like her as the owner, they also really like and admire the manager, Laura. They know that she also started in an entry-level role and that she knows what it's like to be working their roles in the restaurant, and they trust her ultimately. So being able to ensure that the person you are trusting in this role is going to be trusted by others is going to be that foundation for building a high engagement, high trust, positive team. To be clear, I've seen both models work. Sometimes independent restaurant owners hire very experienced managers, and other times they bet on young rising stars within other organizations. The reason that the young rising stars model tends to work better is that people that have many years of experience tend to have higher compensation expectations and less hunger in their career, particularly to take on this role in partnering with the owner of an independent restaurant to grow that restaurant. Whereas the rising stars, they have a huge amount of hunger, they've seen excellent systems up close, and they want to step up to being in that top role. They'll have lower compensation expectations and a longer term view of their career that will enable them to get excited about the idea of partnering with you. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this video. Not only how you attract great talent, but how you set up a system where the manager operates more like your partner and helping you drive the business forward and helping you optimize profitability and isn't just the typical reactionary babysitter of the restaurant. So that takes us to part 2 of recruiting the ultimate top 1% manager for your restaurant. What's so interesting about part 2 is we've already covered how to evaluate the right talent, but that becomes meaningless unless you become the type of leader that deserves to attract high potential managing partners. Because ultimately, what you're looking for in this role is a unicorn, somebody that is very hungry, that has a learner's mindset, that can operate as an owner. And to be able to attract them, you can't offer the same compensation as Chick-fil-A or Texas Roadhouse with 6-figure starting salaries. The key to attracting them instead is being the type of leader that deserves them because you're going to help them grow and because you have a vision that is so big for your business that they can fit their own vision for their life and their goals into your business as it grows and succeeds. That's what aligns you on a really deep level. If they can get excited about being your manager and growing into your partner over the course of years, it will be because they think it aligns with their goals and their vision. That's what's going to make them long-term incentivized with your success. So the best leaders in the interview process, ideally on that initial screen, ask candidates, what are your goals for the next few years? How do you think about your ideal next 5 years of life? It's something that I ask each of the thousands of people that I've interviewed to build my team of 175 people, and I always listen most carefully to this part. The best people who are going to make great managing partners for you and are passionate for restaurants will say something like, I want to own my own business one day, or I want to start my own restaurant, or I want to grow into the manager of a large multi-location group so that I can eventually oversee a whole region of restaurants or a whole operation of restaurants and make something big. The specific answer matters less than the fact that they've got a bigger vision for their life that you can then connect to your vision for your business. So notice when people say stuff like that. As you're sharing your business's plan, then connect it to what they want their own life to become and what they want to grow into. So for example, let's say this is our introductory interview and we've just met. I say, hey, I'm Adam. I'm really excited to get to know you better. I was really impressed by your resume. Would love to start by asking, what are your goals for the next few years? How do you see your life ideally developing? So they've told me their goals, that they want to eventually manage a larger restaurant group and own their own restaurant one day. And then when it comes time for me to share more about the role, I would say something like, I'm looking for somebody that I can treat as my partner as I grow Adam's Italian restaurant. Because while we've only got one location now, and we're the first fast casual, healthy Italian restaurant that is serving all of these made from scratch dishes that are much healthier for you, we're eventually going to have many locations. So somebody that is able to grow into my partner, somebody that is able to help me build out this concept and then grow with the concept to eventually manage multiple locations with me is what I'm looking for. And I'm willing to treat that person like a partner to me and giving them full context on my P&L statements and sharing the things that I learned about building the business so that ultimately they're able to grow into it and build it with me. That's the type of answer that would get this very high potential early career management talent excited to build with me. They know that they'll be able to learn and grow with me as a business owner. And as the concept becomes more successful, they have a bigger and bigger place in that success and eventually could grow into it. In order to have a really big business, you've got to incentivize people with your success and help them understand how they can grow with you. It's the difference between the type of manager that you have to give a very careful checklist of make sure the floors are clean in the bathroom and make sure that the line is operating in this fashion and make sure X, Y, and Z and constantly check in with them and micromanage them versus somebody that is able to take responsibility for all of those things and free you up to being the owner of the business and helping you expand the business versus pulling you in to every little detail. That's what's required. Incentivizing them with your long-term success and making them feel included in that success. You don't have to make explicit promises of saying you're going to make 6 figures here within a year. I would not recommend doing that. But I would say that as we grow to multiple locations and as we drive the profitability of this location, I want to set up a managing partner model where our top managers become managing partners of each location and end up being able to share in the profitability of those locations so that as we build something valuable, your compensation increases with time and your ability to scale yourself as an owner and as a leader grows over time with the success of this concept. This type of language will be especially exciting to that early career, high potential talent that is starting to rise quickly within larger corporations and realizes that they can accelerate their personal growth and accelerate their earnings through joining you and partnering with you versus continuing down a path within a big company. Because that's what so many of the most successful restaurant groups do. They create this managing partner compensation that is tied to each store's profitability, and they elevate their managers into that role where their manager suddenly, as they expand to multiple locations, is taking full responsibility for making each store run as profitably and smoothly as possible, for ensuring a high review profile of each location, for addressing guest complaints quickly when they show up on Yelp and Google and turning them around so that their business's reputation is great, so that new customers become regulars at the highest possible rate, so that the cost profile of the business is optimized, and ultimately to free you up as the restaurant owner to focus on expansion, to focus on building the overall company and work on the business rather than in the business. That's what you can learn from studying the top restaurant groups over the past few decades, the Texas Roadhouses and the Chick-fil-A's, who eventually create a model where their managers make 6 figures through tying their compensation to the individual success of each of the locations that they take responsibility for. That's how they're able to achieve scores that make them the highest performing restaurant, both in terms of profitability and in terms of customer satisfaction. They incentivize their managers to be the leaders of each location. And if your managers, even when you're just starting out, know that that's their future if they help you build this business and that they can join you on the ground floor of building something bigger and eventually sharing your success, that's what's going to keep them motivated and engaged for the long run. That's how both Texas Roadhouse and Chick-fil-A that are using this new restaurant management model are more profitable and more performant than McDonald's, Starbucks, and Subway combined per location. They set their managers up to be managing partners. Another thing which can be used to attract these people that are able to operate in this way is promising them that you'll lead with transparency. This can feel really scary at first. I remember when we first started doing this in my business, I was really afraid to tell people our P&L every month. But what I realized is that in attracting the right type of people who really want to operate as owners who have a learner's mindset that they thrive with all of that additional context, because knowing what the profit drivers are of the restaurant, knowing how well it's doing, knowing what the costs are, helps them make decisions with each of those things in mind and help you as a partner drive things in the right direction versus just having to react to all of your commands and you just dictating every little thing to do. Because ultimately, you dictating every little thing to do can't build a really massive business. And this appeals to the right people because it makes them develop their skills as owners alongside you and maximize their learnings of business, which is what a lot of these high potential people most want: personal growth. What I've seen happens when restaurant owners empower their managers to operate as managing partners is that they get people who are actually working on the business with them rather than just babysitting in the business, meaning that these managing partner mentality people end up going above and beyond, not just in ensuring the restaurant runs smoothly, but in thinking about how they can grow the restaurant's sales and profitability, knowing that they'll share in that. They take initiative in scoping out new partnerships with that local school to do their catering for certain faculty events, or in thinking about how they can drive more people in the community through partnering with the local bar to become their food provider, bringing all of these ideas that they're able to execute on to grow your success. Or watching videos like the ones we post on this channel on the best practices for growing your restaurant's profitability and sales using search engine optimization and automated marketing, or even bringing products in like the one I built at Owner.com to the restaurant that operates like your marketing partner, that basically does all the things for you to help your restaurant grow online. One other pro tip I'll add, particularly when you're looking for managing partner talent, is you want somebody that is even better than you in some ways, or if they're younger talent, that could grow into being better than you. What I mean by that is at first it felt really intimidating to me to be interviewing people for roles in my business that were actually significantly better at some of the things that I prided myself in being good at. Imagine that the candidate you're speaking to seems really charismatic and really experienced in restaurants, even more so than you. There's this fear in the back of our minds as business owners of, are my people going to be even more loyal to this manager, where if we put them in place and then they leave, they might not even be motivated to work anymore. While that can initially feel really scary to bring in people that are even better than you at team management or controlling costs or maybe the culinary side of things, eventually this ends up becoming a superpower because they complement your skill set really well. And it's a good thing if you feel scared about losing the person, because that is the ultimate test that you've got the right person in place. The ultimate test that I use for all of our leadership talent is I ask myself, if this person quit tomorrow, would I be so sad that I wouldn't even want to get out of my bed? I would just feel this pit in my stomach of, oh shit, how is this business going to go on? Because if I have that feeling that I'm going to be terrified and afraid to leave my bed if this person leaves, that means we've got a real superstar in place and need to do whatever it takes to keep them. That means we're building a world-class team. By the way, if you want to continue learning about how to set your managers up for success, we've got a whole new video on that topic dropping on this channel that is going to talk you through all of the systems you can build to make sure that your managers, once you've attracted the right person, are set up for success to drive your restaurant's profitability, to manage labor costs, to manage food costs, to recruit entry-level talent with the latest online strategies and more. So click subscribe down below if you want to see that video when it drops. We intentionally focused this first video on the 80% of making sure that you attract, evaluate, and hire the right management talent with the right mindset and skill set. But once you've got them, that's what the next video is going to cover. And if you want another video that can help you continue learning about driving rigorous restaurant operations, then click to the right of me, because we just released a different video on how you can manage your restaurant's food costs. And it's going really well because a lot of restaurants are using it to double their profitability by keeping their food costs under control and optimizing them on key menu items. So click to the right of me again if you want that video on food cost optimization, and subscribe to this channel. It's entirely free if you want to continue learning about how to set your restaurant up to eventually be able to expand to multiple locations through having the ultimate operating system to set your managers up for success with.